We all are gonna die. 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 Why don't we help each other prepare for it? Without death there could not be life. I'm talking about end of life conversations, conversations about the end of life. Death and dying, grief and loss, conversations about the end of life.
So helping people understand how much goes into end-of-life issues and planning for them. And it's not just funeral planning, it's estate planning, your advanced healthcare directives, so that if you wind up in the hospital and you're unconscious, somebody can speak on your behalf and know what you want.
Welcome to this episode of End of Life Conversations. I'm Reverend Wakil David Matthews.
And I'm the Reverend Mother Ana Luisa Armendariz. In this podcast, we share people's experiences with death and dying, grief and loss, and the end of life.
We really enjoy all of our excellent and insightful guests. They generously tell their stories with compassion and wisdom. We also want to thank Wakil and Wendy's children and partners for that wonderful introductory song. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this episode, we are pleased to speak with Gail Rubin. Gail is a pioneering death educator who uses humor, film clips, and outside-the-box activities to teach about end-of-life topics. An award-winning speaker, she knocked 'em dead at TechXABQ in 2015 with her talk, A Good Goodbye. She's also the author of 4 books on end-of-life issues, and we will put links to all of those in the podcast notes.
Gail is also a certified thanatologist, an advocate for planning ahead, and the host of the Doyenne of Death podcast and Mortality Movies TV series. She also coordinates the Before I Die New Mexico Festival. Welcome, Gail.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, we're looking forward to this. And I met Gail at the conference at what did they
In
call
Seattle.
it? They called it a
Death Care.
Death Care Conference.
Super Conference.
Yeah, Death Care Super Conference in Seattle, and we had a good conversation then too. So I'm really glad you could join us. Looking forward to this. And I did sign up for your Before I Die festival, and have been able to see some of the recordings. And looking forward to more of those.
Yes, they're coming online on YouTube. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. We'll have a link for that. And for the next one, I assume there'll be another one next year, right?
People keep asking for it, so I guess I got to do one.
Well, we always start with the question, when did you first become aware of death?
Would that be like in terms of having someone in your family die, or?
Yeah, it could be. Just basically, could be your dog, you know.
Yeah.
Whenever you kind of had a realization that, we don't stay here forever.
Yeah.
Well, my grandfather, my mom's father, was the first of my grandparents to die back in the 70s. And I was just out of high school then. So I'm Jewish, and I had a good Jewish education. I went to Sunday school. I went to Hebrew school. I had a bat mitzvah. I was confirmed. And with all of this Jewish education, I don't remember much about Jewish funerals being taught. And I've since learned quite a bit about it. And in fact, many people don't know Jewish burial is naturally green burial because according to the traditions, you don't embalm. The blood is considered a part of the body to stay with the body. The body is dressed in cotton or linen clothing and put in usually a plain pine box, some kind of soft wood, without trim, no metal. So it's all biodegradable. And it's supposed to be put in contact with the earth. So a Jewish burial is the closest you can get to green burial in a conventional cemetery.
Yeah.
But of course, I didn't know any of this when I was a teenager and my grandfather died. But I think one of the things that really struck me as teaching about death is what I was supposed to be doing with my life. I majored in television and film in college at the University of Maryland, College Park. one of my classes was a film production class where we all had to make a movie and call it the bubblegum film. It had to be black and white, 3 minutes, Super 8. I'm dating myself here. And a lot of my classmates did something with car chases and something about bubblegum at the end. I did a satire of the opening of Ingmar Bergman's classic film, The Seventh Seal, where a medieval knight, you know it, yes, wakes up on a beach at dawn and death has come for the night. And the knight challenges death to a game of chess in the original 1957 movie. Well, in the bubblegum film, when the knight challenges death to a game of chess, death says he never learned. The idea was, you know, as long as the knight keeps winning the chess game, he gets to live. So in the bubblegum film, death was played by my boyfriend, Bob, and my future ex-husband. And he was just so very funny as death in this movie. And at the end, they agreed to abide by the fortunes and the wrappers and the bubblegum. And death gets his man. The last shot is death and the knight walking down the beach. And death puts his arm around the knight's shoulder and starts skipping. And I love it. I look back at this, and I did get an A on the project.
Yeah.
But I look back at that, and I realize this was the universe telling me this is my future business opportunity to be making fun of death with films. Really, my goal is to get people to plan ahead well before anybody's sick or dead.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thank you.
That's a really good one. Yeah. So honestly, you've started to answer the second question, which is how death impacted your life story, which you just said it was the opening to your continuous acts around death and dying and planning. So tell me more about this.
Well, I actually got into this field because I got married for the second time in 2000. Dave and I had a very creative Jewish Western wedding, and we had everybody dress up in Western wear, and we had a Western swing band fronted by a rabbi. And our rabbi at the time, very musical. In fact, he's in Denver now, Joe Black, Rabbi Joe Black. He played guitar with the band at the reception for a while. But we had such a good time. I wanted to write a book about creative life cycle events and call it Matchings, Hatchings, and Dispatchings. And I got to write a monthly feature in our local newspaper, which looked at weddings and births and deaths. And it was the stories about death and funerals that got the most reader response. And 15 years ago, you know, there was plenty about creative wedding planning, but there wasn't much about creative funeral planning. So I figured, you know, I'm going to focus on funerals, and a good goodbye funeral planning for those who don't plan to die was the result. And that's what really got me into the thanatology field. And I absolutely feel like I'm doing what I was put on this earth to do.
Because this will be audio, we want to just say that A Good Goodbye book is right behind her. It looks great. We might do some advertising with that at some point. So
that'd be so
on
cute.
social media. So that's really good. Thanks for doing it. I love you've also got some wonderful skulls back there.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, so let's see. Yeah, tell us more about your work that you're doing now, and kind of the depth and breadth around what it is and how it works, how it keeps you busy.
So the book came out in 2010. I should probably do a second edition because there's been a lot of change since then. But I've written other books. Hail and Farewell is templates for cremation ceremonies and tips on putting memorial services together. I also did a book called Kicking the Bucket List, 100 downsizing and organizing things to do before you die.
Beautiful.
I love that.
I do like to bring humor into my talks. I also love to use film clips because there are studies that show that people will remember a scene from a movie a lot longer than they'll remember anything a speaker tells them.
Yeah.
So I have a license to use film clips in my talks, and I try to combine that, showing a film or a TV scene, and then talking about the lessons that we can learn from that. And in 2024, I started a TV series called Mortality Movies. And so myself and two other death educators were based in Albuquerque joined me on the set, and we watch film clips and we talk about them, and we have different themes,
Wow.
related to death and grief and funeral planning. And I'm planning a second series because there's still so much to cover and so many great film clips to illustrate with.
Yeah. I had to watch your TED Talk, and it was really fun. Really fun. I love that. It's a unique format and beautiful.
Yeah. And I was one of the first people to hold a death cafe in the United States. A death cafe started in the United Kingdom in 2011 with a guy named John Underwood, who was inspired by the work of a Swiss sociologist named Bernard Cretaz. And Bernard would have these gatherings at cafes. You have a little coffee or tea, some cake or cookies, and talk about what's on your mind about mortality issues. And John actually created a whole social structure to having this event and calling it a death cafe. There are certain rules you have to follow. Funeral homes can't use it as a selling opportunity. And, it's no agenda. It's just set by the people who are there and what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
So I was the first one west of the Mississippi to hold a death cafe in September of 2012. The first one was in August of 2012 in Columbus, Ohio, with Lizzie Miles. And now it's a worldwide movement. And there have been thousands of death cafes held. So I was pleased to be one of the first people to say, I want to do this.
Right.
Yeah. I actually remember writing to John Underwood. I still might have that email, but I wanted to open up a death cafe here after I finished my herbal training way back a long time ago as well. But I always thought, is it really his name? John Underwood?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I just remember, is this his nom de plume for death cafes?
Well, I noticed in the funeral business, there were certain people who, is your name your destiny? There's a guy named Brian Flowers, who is very big in green burial. A woman named Julie Burns, who was a cremation expert. It was too funny, but
that's lovely. So, Gail, what are your biggest challenges in your day-to-day work? So
what I do is I'm a bridge between the general public and people in the end-of-life businesses. I don't consider myself a death doula. I don't particularly want to be around people when they're dying. I've seen enough of that for the past year and a half, which I can tell you about if you want to hear. But my biggest challenge is to get people to talk about death well before it darkens their doorway, so that they can be prepared to better handle it. I'm a big advocate for pre-need funeral planning. Now, whether that means you actually pay for it, if you can't afford it, just figure it out later. But it really helps to have either bought some kind of life insurance, or, in many cases, if you pre-plan with a funeral home, you are buying an insurance policy that will pay the funeral home. And so helping people understand how much goes into end-of-life issues and planning for them. And it's not just funeral planning, it's estate planning, your advanced healthcare directive, so that if you wind up in the hospital and you're unconscious, somebody can speak on your behalf and know what you want. So, unfortunately, even though 100% of us are going to die, less than 30% of adults have done any of this end-of-life planning. And that's going to leave a lot of loved ones scrambling to figure out what to do, how they're going to pay for it, and, if they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. and probably could also and has also created conflict amongst siblings and family members. And so it's such a great, I mean, that's pretty much the theme of our work here, is to try to make sure people know this is something to pay attention to, something to talk about. So thank you for emphasizing that. It's so important. So what do you do to support yourself? Whatever your resources that you have for, and it gets hard. Like, and you could also, I wouldn't mind hearing that story that you offered of the year and a half. Maybe that'll be a good way to kind of segue into how you support yourself when it's hard.
Well, so in terms of like making money at this, really my biggest money maker is holding the Before I Die New Mexico Festival. I'll get several sponsors to underwrite doing that. That's my biggest way of making money. I still sell books. I get a monthly royalty from YouTube for all of my YouTube videos. It's kind of, and I am a certified funeral celebrant, so I charge people if they want me to do a service for them. But yes, the past year and a half, I have had 5 family members die, including my husband, rather unexpectedly after surgery, prostate surgery. And it led to all sorts of medical complications. And within 3 weeks, he was dead.
So
Last
sorry.
week on inpatient hospice. Yeah. And, you know, I talked to my brother-in-law when we were walking into the funeral home to finalize the arrangements that we had made the previous year. You know, I've gone into many, many funeral homes, and this time it feels different.
Yeah.
I have no idea how people who haven't planned ahead can actually go and do this. And it takes a lot longer if you haven't already planned ahead.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Dave died. Both of my parents were still alive then, and my dad had heart issues at the same time I was going through everything with Dave in the hospital in April of last year. And then Dave spent his last week in an inpatient hospice, and I was with him around the clock. In August, my dad turned 93, and like 2 days after that, he had heart trouble again. And he was going to the hospital, and I was talking to him on the phone, and he said, I want what Dave had, meaning inpatient hospice. Yeah. And I said, we will get that for you. And we did. I flew there, and my older brother and I were actually in the room with him when he died at like shortly after 4 a.m, but I was asleep. And he just kind of slipped away. And even though we had pre-planned for my parents 10 years earlier, there was all this going from New Mexico to Florida to Washington, D.C., where the burial was, where I was raised, and then back to New Mexico. So that was...
It's a lot.
It left me with some very unsettled dreams, I think, was to process all that running around. Then my in-laws, Dave's mother and her second husband, they flirted with medical aid in dying together, both of them checking out at the age of 94.
Wow.
It's legal here in New Mexico.
Yeah.
But it turned out that my mother-in-law qualified, but her husband didn't.
Oh.
He was too healthy. So he was like, well, we'll just revoke hospice. But in fact, 6 months later, he was actively dying when I was called to come there. He was sitting in a chair, just drinking water, but he didn't acknowledge that I had come into the house. So my mother-in-law and their friend Bob said, should we call an ambulance? I said, no, I think it's time to call that hospice back.
Yeah.
And I confirmed with their physician, and she agreed. And I got the hospice. They had a nurse there in 2 hours, and they looked at him and they said, yeah, this man is actively dying. And within 3-4 days, he had passed away. And my mother took advantage of medical aid in dying shortly after he did. I mean, she wanted to go when he went, but it was the 4th of July week. So the nurse was on vacation. But it was so weird to schedule your demise.
Yeah.
It was very interesting kind of living with that. And we actually did a very nice ceremony with her before the ingestion. We had a guitar player. And I worked with 2 death doulas here in Albuquerque. Thank God for them, because the husband, he had terminal agitation that was pretty hard to handle. And the doulas took care of that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom just died on October 31st.
Oh, wow.
And that was the long series of hospitalizations with pneumonia, breathing problems.
Mhm.
And, she'd get well enough to go to skilled nursing and then decline again. And finally, the 3rd ER admission since July, she was in the ICU, and the palliative care doctors recommended hospice. And I was like, I kept bringing it up to her each time she was hospitalized. She was like, no, I'm not ready. So this time she didn't have a choice. And that was right before my Before I Die festival.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that was incredibly stressful. I did fly there. I was there for a week while she was still cognizant. And then as they kept increasing the morphine and the Ativan, and she was sleeping all the time, the nurse basically said, go take care of yourself and go back to New Mexico and do your festival. So I did. And it was just like, if I had not done this pre-planning, because the first day of the festival, I'm in, a back room making funeral arrangements, but because it was already set up, I was able to do that. And we set the funeral for the next week. And I'm only just getting to the point where I can finally breathe and relax a little bit.
Yeah. And Gail, I really appreciate you sharing this story with us, your life story. And I just want to take a moment to I appreciate this moment to bear witness to it's a hard lift. You had a lot of heavy lifting to do, and it was easier for you because of the planning, but it's still heavy lifting. And I appreciate that you've done so well with this diverse kind of death processes. And I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, we did wind up doing a dual graveside funeral for my mother-in-law and her second husband. That was different.
Beautiful. Thank you. Again, that's a wonderful story. Appreciate that very much.
And how have you, since October 31st, how have you been resourcing yourself?
So we just had Thanksgiving, and I was pretty sad most of the weekend. I was like, all these deaths and changes, and I've been you're a human being, but a human doing, keeping busy to keep the grief at bay, and finally easing off of all the doing lets the emotion seep in.
Yeah.
And we need to do that. I've got some good friends here who are, we call them our deathies, death doulas, and, folks who like to come to death cafes and whatnot. And they've been very supportive of me. And it's good to have friends like that.
Yeah. That's so important. My wife and I were talking to a social worker this week. She's got a terminal diagnosis as well, but she's doing really well right now. But she's been feeling depressed, and upset, it's anticipatory grief, if you will. And I loved what the social worker said. She said, "Well, have you cried about this?" and Wendy is a person, I think Anna Luisa is another one of those people who doesn't cry very much.
Me and Wendy, yep.
Yeah. And she said, "So let's think about ways you might be able to get some of that out, So do you have any?" And Wendy said, "Oh, there's some music maybe." So she's, she said, she encouraged us to think about ways that we could embellish, get into a space where she could actually allow herself to weep. And she said that might be helpful. And so I really appreciate what you just said, Gail. I think, besides the doing and all that stuff, which you can help yourself with, the mourning is so important, and doing however you mourn. It doesn't have to be crying, but some sort of ritualized or thoughtful mourning of the loss we have. The losses can't be ignored,
One of the films that I love to show to help teach about planning for end of life is a movie called Elizabethtown. And it's actually a romantic comedy, but it features a funeral and a wedding. It features a conflict between a family about cremation versus burial. But there's a couple of passages where the sister asks her brother, who's the main character in the film, have you cried yet?
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't cry until finally he's on a road trip with his father's cremated remains.
Mm.
And that's a great film to check out.
Yeah.
I also like how you mentioned that you seep. And I think I'm a seeper. Like after I get all my doing done, I might seep a little bit. Like that's how it comes out.
I like that. Seeping your weeping.
I'm steeping my weeping. It's little bits and pieces. What frightens you about your end of life?
What frightens me about my end of life is I have a hot tub in my backyard, and I worry that I'll be, and since my husband died, I have no children. I have a cat that, I could die in the hot tub and no one would find my bloated carcass for days.
Oh my, yeah.
And the first time I had that thought, I thought, well, maybe I should get a housemate. And like the universe listens to your thoughts.
Yes.
2 days later, one of my girlfriends, her son was in college here in Albuquerque, and he had dropped out like 6 months shy of getting his degree.
Mm.
And he decided to return and take care of that 6 months of internships that he needed to do. But his brilliant idea was he was going to live in his car. Well, that lasted for one night because his car battery died in a rest stop 40 miles east of Albuquerque. So, my girlfriend called me and asked me if I would go give him a jump. And I'm driving out there and talking to her on the phone this whole time. And I said, well, I was thinking maybe I should get a housemate. So the universe delivered this wonderful distraction for 6 months. Whether he would have noticed if I had died in the hot tub, I think is another matter.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so
I understand that, though.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a good experience, actually, for both of us.
Yeah.
My kids have always thought I was going to end up old and naked and running through the woods somewhere. Like that's since they were little, they would always say that you're going to just be this naked lady living in the woods. I'm like, okay, sure. Until my daughter one day realized but I'm going to make a router necklace for you. So once a day, I'm going to expect you to turn your router on. So I know that you're still alive, Mom. She was like 10 years old when she told me this. The funny thing, they want to check on me. So yeah, the router, I push my button. I'm still here. I'm going to ping you. That is interesting.
That is a good one. Is there anything that you wish we would have asked you? Anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, I talked a little bit about the Before I Die festival concept.
Yeah.
I actually learned about that back in 2016. There was like a 3-day event in Indianapolis around Advanced Decisions Day, death and taxes in mid-April. And there was a group in Louisville that did a bunch of events over the course of October. And when I learned about that, I was like, I got to do a Before I Die festival. And I'm the only person that I know of in this world who has continued to do them. The folks in Louisville, that kind of fell apart. And the Indianapolis thing was a one-time grant. But I've continued to do it. I actually wrote a book about how to hold a Before I Die festival.
Oh, yeah.
And made a Before I Die festival in a box. I created games, the Newly Dead game, which is like the Newlywed game, but the questions are how well you know your partner's last wishes.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is like the Newlywed game.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's great. I love it. The Newly Dead game is perfect.
I love that.
There's the natural organic composting people out here have done one last year, and now they're doing another one that's coming up. So they've got 2 in a row now, and it's about planting and also, of course, the other newer choices for disposition of the body, which is great. And so I'm glad that I remember when I first heard of that, I thought, how is somebody going to make a 3-day? I think it was 2-day program about that, and it turned out it was packed. They had like 600 people
Yeah.
between online
Wow.
and it was a beautiful conference with lots of really good information. And the one you and I met at was also pretty
Mhm.
good, even though it was actually too short, I thought. If I tried to put a lot
Yeah.
into one day. But
Mine, the one I did in this year, 2024, was 4 days
mm,
with a different theme each day: eco-friendly funerals, hospice and medical aid in dying, being prepared,
mm,
and unexpected deaths. And
oh,
it
Mm.
was packed. Yeah,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
lots of great information.
wonderful. Yeah. So
And
glad
those
you
are
do that.
coming out on YouTube, so people
Yeah.
can see those speakers.
Yeah, yeah. I read about who came. It sounds fascinating. Can't wait to see him. So great. Yeah, thank you for doing that work. That's so important. Hopefully, we'll get to join you maybe next year.
That would be awesome.
All
So
right.
we have her poem.
Yeah, you want to read your poem?
Oh, I'd love to read this. This is the final verse of Thanatopsis by William Cullen Bryant, who actually wrote this when he was a very young man.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, when I had asked him about his end of life wishes, he said something about wrapping yourself up in a blanket and laying down on a couch. So he was moved by Bryant's poem in college. So this is the final verse of Thanatopsis.
Mm.
So live that when thy summons comes to join the innumerable caravan that moves to that mysterious realm, where each shall take his chamber in the silent halls of death. Thou go not, like the quarry slave at night, scourged to his dungeon, but sustained and soothed by an unfaltering trust, approach thy grave like one who wraps the drapery of his couch about him and lies down to pleasant dreams.
Mm. I love that.
Wow, yeah. Ooh, I'm wrapping
Mm.
myself right now.
Mhm. I love
Uh,
that.
very beautiful.
So we should all have a peaceful death.
Yeah, yeah. And
May it be so.
yeah. Well, thank you again, Gail. It's been really a pleasure. And
Lovely.
looking forward to seeing you again in person soon, someday.
Thank you.
And have a great holiday season and everything. Yeah, it's been
You
really
too.
nice. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll be holding you as the season ramps
Yes.
up too for, all of our beloveds who are seeping.
Right, exactly.
Thanks so much for joining us on the End of Life Conversations. We appreciate you and look forward to sharing our stories. We encourage you to subscribe to have access to premium episodes and extra resources. Links to our guests and their recommendations and a transcript of this episode will be in the podcast notes.
Yes, thank you so much. And please tell all your friends. Follow us on social media, and again, consider subscribing for some excellent premium content. We want to acknowledge that the music we are using was composed and produced by Charles Heastand. We also want to acknowledge that we live on unceded lands that have been cared for thousands of years by Indigenous peoples who are still here.